The longest federal government shutdown in U.S. history is over. Lawmakers have 3 weeks to sort things out. But beyond the debate on Capitol Hill, hundreds of thousands of federal employees and contractors and their families have taken the brunt of this political standoff, missing paychecks and living under a cloud of uncertainty. Senator Jeanne Shaheen is here today to discuss how things unfolded. Thank you, Senator, for being here.
Nice to be here. And it is very good news that the government is open again, that people are getting paid. So many people had such hard times in the 35 days that the government was closed. That should never happen again.
What is your sense of how the deal came together on Friday, essentially how this so quickly unfolded?
Well, I think pressure had been building because people were really having a difficult time. People were going without being able to pay their rent. They didn't know they had to go to food banks. Too many people had to go to food banks to eat. I had a chance to go down and visit with our Coast Guard members down at the Coast Guard station in Newcastle and heard from them their concerns. You know, they were talking about the day I was there, the Reliance had just gone out for a mission, and they said, you know, all of the people on the Reliance didn't know when they were going to be back home, and their families were left dealing with a shutdown when they didn't know when they were going to get paid. So it's not acceptable, and it's encouraging that a group of bipartisan senators got together and said we need to end this, that we heard from leadership in the Senate and the House that we needed to end it, and I'm pleased that the president finally agreed to sign something. You know, what's ironic, Adam, is that what was agreed to was exactly the same deal that was agreed to before the holidays, that the president said he would sign, and that he reneged on, and that's what led to the shutdown.
You mentioned the food insecurity for the U.S. Coast Guard. Seemingly unconscionable that U.S. troops and their families on American soil could be dealing with something like that. Is there a sense, since unfortunately shutdowns do seem to be kind of the new normal, that perhaps there's a way to, and again, this is bad for any federal employee, right, but particularly for our servicemen and women, is there a way to get the Coast Guard out of this situation so we don't have our military stuck in a shutdown like this?
Well, I think we should do that. I also think we need to make sure that we think about what kind of legislation we can put in place to keep this from happening again, because it shouldn't happen again. You know, the metaphor I use is that the Chinese several weeks ago landed on the dark side of the moon, something that no other country had done. And what was happening in the United States while that was going on? Our NASA employees were not working because of the government shutdown. So we can't expect to stay competitive when this kind of thing happens, and never mind the hardship that it created for so many people who didn't know where their next paycheck was coming from, didn't know how they were going to deal with their bills. And for me, one of the things that really stood out was the dedication of those people who provide services to the American people, the people who work for the federal government, the TSA employees and the corrections officers and the air traffic controllers and, you know, the Treasury employees who work for the IRS, who are working on weekends without pay to try and provide refunds for people. We can't let that happen.
The wall has become such a touchstone in this debate. On the Democratic side, there are many people who feel that building a wall on the southern border is immoral, and yet there are roughly 600 miles of existing barrier, wall, fence, the slats that are there already. If that amount of wall is acceptable, why is more unacceptable?
Well, I think there is more in the works, actually. We passed a budget last year that had $1.3 billion for fencing. That's not even been used yet. And I think the challenge is that we didn't have a plan. Border fencing is important as part of a whole security plan for our borders, and we need to include it in that kind of a plan. I was down at the southern border several years ago and met with Customs and Border Protection officials, met with immigration officials, and what I heard is that the fencing that is there is doing what it's supposed to do. It's difficult to create a whole lot more because of private property interests and because of environmental concerns, but what I heard from them is that that fencing has to be done in conjunction with sensors, with drones, with technology, with imaging at our ports of entry so we can keep out fentanyl and other drugs and guns that are coming into the United States. And as we look at our security needs for our southern border and our northern border, by the way, because we know we share that long border with Canada and there are issues there as well. But it needs to be in the context of an overall security plan, and we shouldn't be putting all the money into fencing and all the money into one technology or another. It needs to be a comprehensive plan.
This is over now, but when it was in process, the Secretary of Commerce essentially was saying, why don't these federal employees just go get a loan? What did you think of that advice?
I thought it was totally out of touch with what people were experiencing, and just an outrage that we have members of the administration who don't understand what regular people are dealing with on a daily basis.
I know that this shutdown started when Republicans were in control, and obviously Democrats are in control now of the House. To what extent, though, are Democrats responsible moving forward to ensure that the government remains open?
I think we've all got to redouble our efforts to work together. You know, the shutdown ended because of bipartisan efforts, and bipartisan efforts are going to deal with border security. The border security that we have in place is the result of Democrats and Republicans working together on a plan. I voted for the current budget for border security, as did most of my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, my Democratic colleagues and Republican colleagues. And that's how we're going to address the challenges that this country faces. It's by working together, by looking at what we need to do, by putting everything out on the table and coming up with a strategy and a plan to address it.
More developments in the Mueller investigation to end the week. Roger Stone, a longtime associate of President Trump before he was even a politician, arrested, indicted in connection with Russian interference in the 2016 election. Do you think there comes a point, if this investigation continues on, where Senate Democrats like yourself say, we need to know, the public needs to know what's going on here, and as I'm sure you're going to say, the Mueller investigation should continue till its logical end, but how long should that be? At some point, the people do need to know.
Well, they do, and I think it's very important to see the progress that the Mueller investigation has made. The indictments, as you point out, Roger Stone was indicted today, and the convictions, Cohen, the former Trump attorney, has been sentenced already and convicted. So we're seeing progress in this investigation, and we need to let it go to conclusion. We need to make sure that when it's finished, that the American people know what the investigation turned up, that we follow through on any recommendations for criminal indictments and for other actions, and that the American people know what happened so it never happens again.
There is a fervor in the Democratic base to impeach President Trump. Do you see yourself at some point, if this investigation continues in the direction it's going and perhaps the president is indicted, is that an impeachable offense, perhaps, obstruction of justice?
Well, I'm not going to speculate because we don't know what the report is going to come back with. Obviously, I've had my disagreements with President Trump, and I'm sure that will continue. But we need to let this investigation play out. We need to let Bob Mueller come to his conclusions and release the report to the American people so the people of this country can see what happened and, again, make sure that it doesn't happen again.